Welcome to the CHCH Newsmakers podcast. I'm Rick Zamperin. My guest today is a Hamilton author whose amazing life story is captured within the pages of a new book that was rejected by 20 Canadian publishers before winning 2 international awards. Joining me today is the author of The Weeping Degree, Kelly Watt. Kelly, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rick. It's a thrill to be here.
This is, and I just very casually, wide brushstrokes, talked about how this book is so inspirational because there is a deep and thoughtful and life-altering moment that you lived, and we're going to go through it. But this book is called The Weeping Degree. Maybe we'll start with that. What is the meaning behind the title of this book?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that. So the weeping degree is actually an astrological term, which people might not be familiar with. If I don't know how much people know about astrology, but the world is, of course, is round. We have a mandala of different houses, and each house that a planet might appear in has 1 to 30 degrees.
Okay.
And the end of the 30 degrees is considered the end of that particular house. The weeping degree is referred to as the anorectic degree, or the degree of fate, or the degree of descent. So it's usually from 28 to 30 degrees. And it's when things fall apart in your life, your dreams collapse, kingdoms fall, that sort of thing, before something new is born. So It's kind of a little bit like the birth canal. And I just loved that expression in astrology and Greek myths. There are all these wonderful metaphors for very human experiences. I think we all go through periods of time where things fall apart in our lives. We all go through adversity. We all go through difficulties. So I wanted to write about how that difficulty resonates throughout a person's life and changes over time.
Yeah. Now, the subheading to The Weeping Degree itself is How Astrology Saved Me from Suicide.
Yes.
And that, the title itself draws you in, but now when you're reading this part of it, it's like, okay, I need to find out what happened. So
Good.
What did happen?
That's good. We debated, of course, about whether to keep in the subtitle or not, but I felt that it was important. At a certain point, a very difficult point in my life, when I was really depressed and had moments of suicidality, friends suggested I go see an astrologer, and I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And but I went to see this astrologer, and what was great about him is he perfectly acknowledged what I was going through. He said, this is a very difficult chart. You have a difficult early life, but your life will improve as you go along. If you undertake the process of healing, if you make a commitment to it, there's no way out but through. And if you embrace it, it will bring you gifts. And that changed my whole perspective. It gave me a sense of hope, both about what I was going through. He wasn't saying, think positive and everything's going to be fine. He wasn't saying that. But at the same time, he also presented a kind of view of the universe as benevolent, I guess. And it gave me hope. And so I felt, okay, there's a purpose to all of this. I don't see it now. We often don't see the big picture when we're going through something horrific. But it gave me hope.
So how long ago was this?
Oh, this is, over 30 years ago.
Okay. So as your friend is saying, you should see an astrologist. You're thinking, what? Is that what's kind of going through your mind, or were you just like, okay, I'll give it a shot?
Well, I have to mention that I did my last year of high school in India. So I went to a missionary school in India, and I graduated from that school. So I was introduced to Hinduism and Buddhism, and I was really fascinated by other religions, and by Buddhism in particular. And so I had kind of adopted this idea of, okay, the soul, we're here as souls and we're evolving as we go through time. So it wasn't too bizarre for me to go see him, but it certainly was a new world. Yeah.
So that's the astrology part.
Yes.
The near death by suicide part, how did that develop? How did you get to that point?
Well, when I was 15, I attempted suicide, and I called it off. I kind of got 3/4 of the way there and then called it off, and partly because I was interrupted by someone, and Yeah, so, this was a theme that reoccurred throughout my life. I went through a lot of depression before I ended it in therapy when I was around, I guess, 25 or so. And then I started seriously doing healing work. So, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And are you willing to go to the dark place that once was? and not in great detail, but how did you get there?
How did I get there? Well, one of the things that, I don't know if you're familiar with the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences.
Okay.
And people who have had a lot of trauma early in life. I had spent, my mother was a single mother, and I was sent out to board with lots of other adults, and so I only saw her on the weekends. So I had a lot of neglect and abandonment. And then I was abused. I was targeted by 2 pedophiles while I was in boarding. So I had a lot of these adverse experiences growing up. And of course, what's the result of these experiences? We know from the stats that people who have had early trauma tend to have higher rates of substance abuse, higher rates of suicidality, higher rates of physical pain, physical illness, chronic illness, that sort of thing. And so that's exactly what happened to me too. And I began drinking and drugs and, the wildlife when I was quite young. And it took me many years to wrestle with that.
Well, thanks for sharing that and being, willing to offer what had happened, because I think it serves as an inspiration for others who were in a dark place to see that you're still here with us. You have an award-winning book. You're doing some great things, and you can turn it around. And in your case, back to astrology. So as you're going through this process of learning about how it all works, when did it click for you?
When did the idea of astrology click for me?
Well, when did you realize that, okay, I now know what I'm supposed to do or how I fit in this world?
Wow, that's great. I really just want to say thank you for saying the book is inspirational, because I wrote it as a letter to the despairing, those lost and lonely souls who feel as though they're broken and they'll never be well. And I really wanted people to know that there's a spiral, there's a process for healing, and it is doable. It is doable. So when did I feel that I understood it? I guess I began to trust astrology. My friend, who was an astrologer, when he began to predict things that actually happened. Wow. So for instance, this book was kind of born as a result of that. We were in the pandemic, and I was working on a nonfiction book. In fact, I had the idea, I love that title, The Weeping Degree. I love the idea of, this image of tears and how we go through this period of time where the tears are cleansing. And I kept trying to write it as a nonfiction book, and it just was not coming together. I just would pull it out and shelve it, pull it out and shelve it. And anyone who's a writer knows that happens. You have those projects in the drawer, right, that never get out of the drawer. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like, oh, we're going nowhere. And all of these people were dying around us. It was very, it was traumatic for everyone. And so I called my friend Michael Zizas, who is the astrologer who's quoted a lot in the book. And he said, well, Kelly, there's you have the signature of the poet in your chart. If you were to turn your hand to poetry at this time, you might find it really flows for you. And I thought, I don't think I believe him. I'm not sure. When he tells me good things, I don't always believe him. So I'm a bit of a skeptic. But I thought, well, that's so interesting because I have this idea. And so I contacted a woman named Judith Hill who runs poetry workshops. And I met her in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And she said, Kelly, I've got this great class. It's called Manuscript Plan. You bring together all your poems that you've written, and we put them into a book. And I said, Judith, I don't have any poems. I just have an idea.
Right.
And she said, just come. And I thought, okay, this is my pandemic pivot.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I dropped what I was doing, and I joined a bunch of her courses. And it was the poetry community is a really supportive, wonderful community. And here I was a part of this group for months and months, and we just, sort of shared what was in our hearts, and it was a very safe place to do that. And sure enough, by the end, I had the rough draft of a book. So that was my pandemic pivot. Wow. And also how, astrology turned out to be true. I mean, I had to take a leap of faith that I would be able to write poetry for that period of time. I hadn't written a poem since I was 17.
Wow. And so before we were talking about writing a novel, were you a writer, quote unquote, before the pandemic? Was this your thing?
Yes,
okay.
It was my thing. I wrote, my first novel was called Mad Dog, and it was published by Doubleday Canada in 2001. And it came out, my launch party was September 13th after 9/11.
Wow.
So it was a bit of a bizarre experience.
Yeah.
And then I'd also written nonfiction, and I work writing newsletters and stuff like that. I have, writing jobs like everybody else. So yeah, I'd been writing for many, many years, but I hadn't been writing poetry. I'd kind of put poetry aside. So I think one thing that's great, the pandemic, we talked about pivoting in the pandemic. I know a lot of people who made changes at that time, and I think having the courage to make those changes, to just taking a leap of faith, is sometimes really important for your creativity, your renewal, your, having a fresh perspective on things. Yeah. And the poems, he was right. I mean, the poems did come. I was very surprised that they did. I thought really I had finished writing about sort of the dark era of my life, but no, it just came out in a new way, and I think I was following it and trusting my gut, which is usually a good thing for creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Pivoting during the pandemic, we heard so many stories of people losing their jobs and then starting something entirely new, or people quitting their jobs, realizing that now is the time to make this pivot and starting something entirely new. And for you, you had the base of being a writer, but now you're writing in a very different way. What was the biggest challenge for you to go from writing a novel to writing poetry?
I think it was trusting that it would come together as a book, that I would learn the skills that I needed to learn, and that if I just kept taking these courses and showing up and sharing, taking a risk to share things that were pretty raw and maybe not very polished, that I would find a way to polish them, and that would work out. So yeah, I would say those are the main things that it struck me. And yes, as you said, so many people did make a pivot at that time, and I think it was important. I think those pivots are important, and they teach us something about ourselves. One of my favorite authors is, of course, Margaret Atwood, who's, so famous. And what does Margaret Atwood do? She pivots. She does all kinds of different books. And I admire that. I mean, I think it takes courage.
And it takes a lot of talent as well.
Yeah, she does have a lot of talent.
From one to the other and be as successful as the last, right?
Yes, that's true.
So The Weeping Degree is poetry. It's not a novel.
No.
But it's a story of how astrology saved you from suicide. So as you're weaving from page to page, how are you expressing the journey?
Yes. Well, one of the things I realized I needed to do in the book was keep it extremely focused.
Right.
So I wanted to just focus on that weeping degree and how those specific traumas were manifested later on in life, how each one, as I worked through my life, as I have gone on through my life, slightly transformed from a wound to a gift through healing in time. So I wanted to stay very focused on that trajectory, and that helped to keep the book focused, I guess. And I also, I could have written, as I said, I tried to write it as a nonfiction book originally. I felt that it would be really traumatizing, and of course there are many famous books out there about trauma. But by doing it in tiny little segments, and I should say they're poems, and they're also flash prose. So there's little pieces of tiny essays or tiny prose poems. I made it possible for me to write about it without being re-traumatizing, and hopefully for the reader to read about it without being re-traumatizing. Right. And I should say too that it reads like, I think it reads like a story, one big story, not like a novel, but like one cohesive story. It's not just separate poems. I think they do flow into one another. And at one point I had them all in little pieces of paper, and my teacher told me, just lay them out on the floor and you'll figure out what the order is. Really? And I thought, okay, it kind of has an astrological order rather than a completely chronological order. Right. But so that's how that worked it out. And I ended up dividing it into 3 sections. So the first section is called The Home for Little Girls, and it's about that foster experience and the original traumas. The second part is called The Buddha and the Pink Futon, and it's about the geographical cure and going to India and discovering Buddhism and meditation. And the third part is called Hands Across the World, and it's about the ways in which survivors come together to support one another, and how when we share our stories, there's that saying, we're only as sick as our secrets, that we bring healing not only to ourselves but to other people. And so that having that structure, coming up with those titles and those sections, that also helped to focus the book for me.
Well, talk a little bit about that healing. This must have been incredibly cathartic for you to write and for others to consume.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. I mean, writing is not therapy. They're different things, and I think one needs to do both. But writing in and of itself, because it's creativity, I think it's in our nature as human beings to make meaning of our suffering. And when we do that, we feel transformed. So, yes, I think one of the most transformational aspects of the book was, of course, reading the poems for the first time out loud to strangers and seeing their reaction. And when I give readings, often people come up to me and share things they've been through, which is really heartwarming. I mean, it's really moving.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the feedback that you get from people who have purchased the book and have read it. They must send you notes from, all sort of circumstances in terms of how it impacted them.
Yes, I've gotten notes often on social media and through Facebook. People will write me. I think they feel a bit safer there.
Right.
Sometimes people will actually come up afterwards and they've told me they feel that it was really powerful and it really helped them to have hope. I mean, one of the things that shocks me is I had one person come up to me, an older man, an older gentleman, who had never told anyone his whole life, and I thought, how horrific to carry the burden of something like that for so long without feeling safe enough to tell someone. I think that's a terrible fate for people. I think we all need a friend we can be honest to or honest with, and we all need to the more we keep something to ourselves, the heavier it is to carry.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he told a complete stranger.
Yes.
Who was obviously affected by the words that he was hearing, right?
Yes, yes. I wasn't a complete stranger, but I was someone removed, not a close friend.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it's easier. I know with myself, I had difficulty sharing some of the things I'd been through because I wanted to protect the people around me. I didn't want them to have when people go through any experience of violence, they go through a terrible loss of faith in themselves and the safety of their own bodies and the safety of the world and their faith. And can be a long journey back from that. And so there's a tendency for people to hold their own pain and protect the people around them. And so I hope the book does encourage people to tell their story and to reach out for help. And I really have appreciated the feedback I've gotten from people. It's been really heartwarming. It makes it feel all worthwhile.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, there might be some people saying astrology. I don't know. This sounds like poppycock, and they're not a believer. And what's your advice to them? How should they get into it? Maybe believe what the stars, I guess, are telling us.
Well, there's all different schools of astrology, like, astrology and astronomy don't agree. Like medicine, right? You can Google any subject and you will get about 3 or 4 opinions.
Yeah.
Every one of them,
300
3 or 400, and many of them valid.
Yeah.
I would say that having lived in India, remember that the early mariners navigated by the stars. And so the stories of the stars, the seasons, all the various things, the stars were used to navigate and to understand the world. And this was a very ancient science. And in India, for many, many years, people used astrology as a way to decide weddings, to decide compatibility between people, best timing to do things. My friend Michael always says, it's all about the timing, right? There's times when things will go ahead and times when they will not. So why fight against the flow? So I think it's good to have a little bit of skepticism and, be discerning. But I also think that these are some astrology is a kind of ancient tool, and we shouldn't just diss the ancient world.
Right. And I guess, if people allow themselves to just make it happen or let it happen, I guess is the way I want to put it, that it'll happen for them. Does that make sense?
What do you mean, let it happen?
Well, in terms of, here's the 30 degrees, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Right? And that the next degree is coming whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Just to allow it to develop and see what happens from that, I think that's a big part of it.
Yes. Well, it's acceptance, isn't it?
That's what I'm going with, yes.
The truth is that, we will all have loss. We will all have a time of weeping in our lives.
Yeah, it's bound to happen.
And it teaches us, what does it teach us? It teaches us humility and also compassion for our fellow man, because we realize they will too. And, in the 80s, when I was kind of going through my breakdown, there was this kind of thought that somehow if you went into therapy or you asked for help, that you were weak in some way. And I thought that was such a disservice. Because, you wouldn't fix your car if you know nothing about cars by yourself.
Right.
People need to reach out to other people who are experts in whatever they do. And asking for help is not a weakness. It's a good idea many times.
I'm going to read a little snippet from The Weeping Degree, How Astrology Saved Me from Suicide, by award-winning author Kelly Watt. And I'm going to get your, not necessarily your reaction, but your interpretation to the words that I'm going to read here. And this is very early on in the book. In fact, I think it's page 15, which is the first kind of page of the poems. But you write, I confess, I came so close, St. Clair train thundering under his floors, my shoes shivering with knowledge, until he showed me there are secret tunnels, whole underground cities, above signs in stars. These are your words. I'm reading them.
Yes.
Not sure if I read them correctly as you had written them.
No, beautiful. Very well done.
What's going through your mind as you're writing those words on this page?
It was a moment of epiphany that I'm writing about, where, sometimes you meet someone in life who shows you a new way of looking at the world, and that there might be a bigger picture to what was happening to me and to a whole generation. Let's remember, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who's gone through child abuse or violence. We have whole generations of women coming forward right now. We're in a wave of telling and of rethinking about how we speak about sexuality and what is abuse and what is consent and all of these things. So for me, meeting with the astrologer was a moment of epiphany that I was part of a generation, that I was part of a movement in my own life that could be predicted in the stars in some small way, and that I needed to embrace it or accept it and keep going. Trust in the process, which is very difficult to do when your trust has been broken. But there is a process.
Yeah, poetry is so open, in many cases, so open to interpretation. When you find that someone reads this book, and you've talked to dozens or hundreds of people who have read it, do they have a different level of interpretation in terms of how they see you on these pages?
That's a really good question. What are some of the feedback I've got? Some people relate to the astrology in the book, and I think it gives them a sense of, okay, the universe has our back. The universe is evolving in some kind of way, even though it feels like certain issues in life don't change. They take so long to change. Yeah. Why do they take so long to change? They are actually incrementally changing. It's like, we live on a former seabed here that used to be down at the equator.
Right.
So how could that be? Well, because in time, things are incrementally moving forward and changing. Often people relate to the violence. They've had experiences of violence themselves, or they've known people who have had violence. I've had people come up to me and say, I wish I had known all of this before. I would have helped so-and-so. I would have said something different to so-and-so. And that sort of thing, that's often kind of the response that I get.
This was, as I read in the intro, rejected almost 24 times from publishers. What happened? How did it all of a sudden, one publisher said, okay, let's do this?
Well, I had sent it out to about 20 publishers and in Canada, but of course it was the pandemic. And what I noticed was happening is that many of those smaller publishers, particularly poetry publishers, which are let's say poetry is not, the best way to make $1 million, were closing. And so I felt that I just had this sense of urgency that this issue was really important and that I should not wait. And so I went with a little publisher called Wild Rising Press in Colorado, which was a hybrid. And I'm really glad I did. And the timing was right. I mean, so many news issues, Giselle Pellicot and all these other Epstein files, all of these things. I'm glad I did not wait, and that's one of the reasons why we have hybrid publishing, is because it's faster and you can get something out there in the world. And the book thus far has won a distinguished favorite, which is a second prize with the Independent Press Awards in the U.S., bronze medal with the Wishing Shelf Book Awards in the UK, and it's nominated right now for, or long-listed, for a poetry prize with Whistler Independent Book Awards. So I'm waiting to hear, so I'm very excited. I'm very thrilled.
Congratulations on
Thank you.
And hopefully the long list turns into a very short list of one winner. Or
you.
however many winners they announce.
Thank you.
Are you surprised by the success of the book?
A little, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm thrilled and kind of taken aback.
Right.
And I just went to the book camp for the Independent Press Awards in Newark, New Jersey. And they had quite a gala affair, and they also had a great conference. And I met all these other brilliant writers who, their books had been winning awards too, and it was just a really great experience. Mm-hmm. So, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. And especially because this really was a project of the heart. I didn't know where it would go. Yeah. I didn't know how many people would read it. I had no sense of it at all, really, because it was such a leap of faith and I was writing in such a different way. So I'm just really glad I did it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to trust your gut sense of something, as I said before.
Yeah. So now that you're an award-winning poet, are we expecting more poetry, or are you going to go back to novels, or what's your future plans?
Well, I have a couple of projects on the go. I always do. And I've spent a lot of time writing and need to catch up with my publishing. I have another poetry book that I'm working on, but I also have a war book, which is a war novel, and that's with my agent at present, so I'm waiting to hear.
Okay. Fiction or nonfiction?
Fingers crossed. Fiction.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Sounds very exciting.
Yes.
What is your hope when people read this? What do you hope they take away from it?
Yes, good question. I hope they take away an understanding that a couple of things, that there is a process to healing. There's a spiral process, and wherever you are on that spiral is just where you are. You just need to accept that. And it's good sometimes to look where you came before, because sometimes we can feel that we were very stuck. And it also, I hope the book sort of outlines what the next step might be on that spiral and on that process. And I wanted the book really to give people hope, to know that, this too will change, as slowly as it may feel. It is changing, the world changes, and there are as many, what does Helen Keller say? Although the world is full of suffering, it's also full of the overcoming of it. And we need to hold on to that, especially in these times. Absolutely. Where can we get the book? Thank you. The book is available on Amazon, and you can also order it. It's with Ingham Spark through your independent bookstore. If you want to go and order the book, I'd be thrilled. And I want to ask people, too, if they could, to sign up for my newsletter. Please go to my website, www.kellywatt.ca. I have a newsletter with all kinds of little deals and fun updates and different things. Yeah. Amazing. The book is called The Weeping Degree, How Astrology Saved Me from Suicide. Kelly, thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you so much for having me, Rick. It's been a delight. Great conversation. And thank you to our all-star cast behind the scenes. A big thanks to them. If you like today's episode, click the thumbs up, hit subscribe. You can leave a comment as well. Catch the Newsmakers podcast on chch.com/podcasts and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.